Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we uncover the weird, wonderful, and surprisingly complicated stories behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our incredibly inquisitive viewers, Fork Master 3000. Thanks for the suggestion, Fork Master. You asked, why do forks have prongs? Great question, because when you think about it, why don't we just use a single metal spike? Or a tiny shovel? Or, hear me out, our hands, like our ancestors did. Well, grab your fanciest silverware, because today we're slicing through the history, science, and slightly ridiculous evolution of forks, right here on Explaining Everything. Long before forks became the champions of spaghetti twirling and awkwardly scraping the last bit of cake off a plate, people were just grabbing food with their hands. Yep, cavemen, all hands. Ancient Romans, mostly hands. Medieval kings, filthy, buttery, sauce-covered hands. But eventually, humans decided, hey, maybe we should stop looking like raccoons digging through a trash can and invent some tools. Enter the fork, or at least something that kind of looked like one. The earliest forks were more like little spears, 2 prongs. Simple, elegant. Dangerous? Absolutely. These were mostly used for cooking, because when you're working with fire, it's a good idea to keep your fingers not on fire. But as people started getting fancier, forks made their way to the dining table, though not without controversy. You see, back in the day, people were suspicious of forks. Imagine someone in the 11th century whipping out a tiny, 2-pronged metal stick to eat their roasted boar. Scandalous. People thought forks were unnecessary, weird, and possibly the work of the devil. Because obviously, the devil's greatest trick was slightly more efficient eating. Luckily, rich people didn't care. Wealthy Italians in the Renaissance were like, you know what's classy? Not looking like a caveman. So they started using forks. France took a little longer to get on board, because apparently, if it wasn't a baguette or a battle, they weren't interested. But by the 17th century, forks became a symbol of sophistication, and everyone wanted one. Okay, so we've established that forks exist because humans decided hands were so last season. But why do modern forks have 4 prongs? What's so magical about the number 4? First, let's talk about stabbing efficiency. 2 prongs, good for spearing things, but terrible for scooping up smaller foods. 3 prongs, better but still missing something. 4 prongs, perfection. Enough grip to hold onto food, but not so many that your fork looks like an agricultural tool. But wait, why not 5? Or 6? Or a terrifying, spiky monstrosity? Because at a certain point, you stop grabbing food and start shredding it. Imagine trying to eat spaghetti with an 8-pronged fork. You'd end up with a tangled mess worthy of a horror movie. 4 prongs are the Goldilocks zone. Sharp enough to stab, curved enough to scoop, spaced just right for food to not fall through like a bad game of Operation. It's the perfect balance between function and not looking ridiculous. Forks aren't just random pieces of metal with some sticks on the end. There's science involved. First, the shape of the prongs matters. They're slightly curved to help scoop up food, but straight enough to stab things effectively. If they were too straight, you'd be poking holes in your plate like an overexcited toddler. Too curved, and you'd basically have a weird, tiny shovel. Second, the spacing is crucial. Too close together, and food gets stuck. Ever tried washing mashed potatoes out of a fork? Nightmare. Too far apart, and you're just dropping your food like a malfunctioning claw machine. And then there's the length of the prongs. Short prongs, good for salads and smaller bites. Longer prongs, better for picking up heavier foods. That's why dessert forks have shorter prongs. They're designed for delicate foods. Meanwhile, those extra long barbecue forks, designed for ultimate meat domination. Not all forks follow the four-prong rule. The world is full of specialty forks, because apparently eating isn't complicated enough already. Carving forks, two long, intimidating prongs. These are basically tiny pitchforks for meat. Fish forks, weird, three-pronged things designed specifically for flaky fish. Fancy? Unnecessary? Absolutely. Salad forks, slightly shorter, slightly wider, because salads demand their own tools, apparently. Oyster forks, tiny, three-pronged forks made for scooping oysters, because someone decided seafood deserved its own VIP cutlery. Spork, the ultimate hybrid. A fork and a spoon had a baby, and it became the champion of indecisive eaters everywhere. You might think forks have reached their peak form, but who knows? Maybe one day we'll get self-cleaning forks, or smart forks that count calories, ruining all joy in life. Or maybe, just maybe, forks will evolve backward into their caveman roots, and we'll all just start eating with our hands again. For now, though, forks remain one of the greatest inventions in human history, right up there with fire, the wheel, and Wi-Fi. So the next time you sit down to eat, take a moment to appreciate the humble fork. It's been through a lot to get to your table. Now go forth and eat responsibly. Or don't. Just try not to drop your food. If you enjoyed this video, or if you suddenly gained a newfound appreciation for the humble fork, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.